pretty big ramp up that we're going to see, and all this needs to be basically installed by people. This is about people, and the energy transition is about people. I mean, it's great to walk around and look at machines and technology, but ultimately it's about us and how we work together and how we do things in the best possible way. And as an industry, our social license and the support we're going to have from society is going to depend on how we do this and what kind of workforce we have. Now, of these, Andrea will run through the report and the detail in a second, but of these kind of incremental trained technicians we're going to need, and it's a pretty substantial amount, around about 450,000 people who are going to need their GWO licenses by 2026. 86% of this is going to happen in just 9 countries: China, the USA, Germany, India, Brazil, Japan, South Africa, Vietnam, and South Korea in our calculations. And they're all countries with very different histories and cultures, and it's really important that the learnings of the wind industry all around the world from different places are transmitted and shared, and we have a really collaborative approach. And I just want to say one last thing as well. Being a wind energy technician, I've been, it's not about just being big and strong anymore. It's not some kind of, it's not brute force. It's about, it's about brains. And I want to say something about gender diversity and building the workforce that we need, right? Anyone can be a wind technician. It requires tenacity and brains. It's not about brute strength. So we really want to see more women in this sector. Generally, in the wind industry, our figures still are not fantastic as an industry, and we need to get much better at doing this, and specifically as technicians as well. We want to make this industry attractive. We want people to come forward and be, fighting and pushing and wanting to take these jobs. So we really need to make ourselves attractive as an industry. And at this conference at Hamburg yesterday, I met with a group of 22 women from our Women in Wind Global Leadership initiative from all over the world, and just the kind of enthusiasm and the knowledge and the expertise in that group, and the kind of different angles, that, how much I learned just in a couple of hours talking to them. That knowledge and that kind of diversity of knowledge needs to come into our industry. So we're really going to work hard, I think, with GWO to make sure everyone gets trained and is trained to the right standards, and working together on our events around the world, making sure that GWO is with GWEC everywhere we go. So we're not just calling for more gigawatts, but we're actually talking to governments around the work and the training and the opportunities that the wind industry is going to face. And then also on the gender diversity, let's really make this the center of our industry over the next 10 years. So looking forward to hearing from Andrea on the report, and thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and hi, everyone. So finally, 2 days ago, we published our joint report together with GWEC, which you can download from our websites. And before starting, I just want to spend a few words of introduction about myself. I have worked in the wind industry for about 6 years now. I started off at Wood Mackenzie as an analyst for covering Northern and Western European markets. I also worked 2 years in robotics, where, among other things, we made studies on application of robotic solutions on operation and maintenance, and also studies on workforce automation. And I recently rejoined the industry in April with the Global Wind Organization as a business analytics manager. Today, what I want to do is to spend a few words about GWO, our mission and our impact, get into the findings of the report of our workforce outlook, and highlight a couple of action points for our stakeholders. Then I would like to close with introducing our new framework for entry-level technicians. So GWO's mission is to foster a safe work environment in the wind industry. And the way we do it is by setting standards that can be applied globally. Our members are very well-known companies spanning the value chain, are primarily OEMs, asset owners, developers, operators, and to qualify as one of them, the requirements are you have to either have 1 gigawatt of capacity installed or in an advanced stage of development, or you have to have at least 1,000 technicians working within the wind industry. Members have a primary role as duty holders and employers to implement and commit to GWO standards, both internally and with the subcontractors, wherever appropriate. To create training standards, HSE and training experts typically gather knowledge and data on the most relevant risks within the wind turbine environment. The standards are prioritized by looking at the impact. That means that the larger the cohort of technicians that can be covered, the higher the priority order. So far, we have identified about 35 risks and covered most of them. There is consensus among our members that GWO has managed to coalesce the industry around a common safety culture and improve the standards for safety training. Standardization means broader recognition, and recognition is a big incentive for a wind technician to stay and move within the industry. More mobility within the industry also means that it's easier to retain people and create local jobs, and also reduce traveling times, which has a positive repercussion on cost reduction. Training records are held by individuals, and they are stored in a database called WindEnergy. The fact that they're held by individuals is also a benefit, because it empowers the course participants to show that they are certified, and it also allows their employers to verify their training status, and even at any point in time. During the last years, we have expanded our presence a lot in terms of both countries and training centers. Today, you can take a GWO training practically everywhere. It's almost like a 7-Eleven of training, of safety training. The form and quality remains the same, broadly the same across the globe. What changes is the price. The more training centers are established, the more the price goes down, and the more it becomes affordable for employees and also for individuals. Right now, we are in the process of expanding our activities in Latin America and also in Asia. And this year, we're on track to reach 150,000 certified people. So, why is it useful to forecast technician workforce? I believe the one reason is visibility. We need help. We need to help training providers to allocate the right supply capacity where and when it's needed. The other one is basically preparedness. We need to help align expectations across different stakeholders so that there is a correct match of demand and supply. So what we hope and we believe is that this study can help stimulate the debate on how we can actually cover those gaps in technician training. So today we will answer 3 questions, maybe a little more. What's the size of the technician workforce from 2022 to 2026? And how many of them already have a standard training certificate of GWO in at least one valid GWO module? And what are the biggest opportunities for educators and training providers to enhance safety of the workforce via GWO training? The result of our model is a number of wind technicians that are active within the construction and installation and operation and maintenance phases of project development. These numbers also, both onshore and offshore. These numbers also reflect the total number of people that will need to have safety and technical skills during the outlook period to reach the cumulative capacity of 1,400 gigawatt that GWO is forecasting. The forecast, if we look at the phases of project development, the forecast excludes the phases that are not within the construction, installation, and operation and maintenance. So we do not take into account planning, manufacturing, which is traditionally the most labor-intensive phase of project development, procurement, and then also others like transportation and decommissioning. So the data foundation for the forecast are GWO's capacity forecast, both annual and cumulative. We also have some project-specific data on such as the number of projects, the number of turbines, turbine rating, and in the case of offshore project, distance from shore, and O&M and logistics setup. So starting from, how do I get back actually? Red button. Perfect. So starting from the baseline, GWO obviously needs no introduction. They produced industry-leading market forecast, and their expectations for the next 5 years are actually rather impressive. We are looking at more than 500 gigawatt of new installed capacity in the next 5 years, leading up to a total of 1,400 gigawatt by the end of the outlook period. And since we focus on both the workforce involved in construction, installation, and operation and maintenance, let's look at both. So workforce dynamics typically follow different patterns based on the stage of project development. Since the cumulative fleet grows incrementally, so does the number of O&M technicians that are involved in O&M. They grow in a linear way and without major fluctuations. On the other hand, the demand for technicians within the construction installation phase is more volatile because it follows the annual installation patterns. So throughout the outlook, we have spotted some efficiency gains, especially from in terms of turbine rating. So the bigger the turbines, the lower the amount of turbines, and also that slows down the total number of people that are needed on a per megawatt basis. The output of our model is a forecast where we expect the total workforce, technician workforce, to grow by 33% throughout the outlook period from 2021 to 2026. What we have here is a situation where wind additions increase at a stable annual rate, and therefore the demand for onshore wind technicians required for construction installations remains rather flat year over year. By contrast, offshore wind will see much more installations, a much faster growth, and this is also reflected in the number of technicians that will be involved in the construction installation of offshore turbines. O&M, operation and maintenance, grows steadily throughout the outlook, and this is the case for both onshore and offshore. Overall, offshore wind technicians demand for offshore wind technicians will grow faster than that for onshore, but we need to remember that the bulk of the opportunity remains, almost 90% of it remains within the onshore segment, especially within O&M. So for this study, we focused on 9 key markets, where we expect that demand for training, for safety training, will be particularly strong during the next years. Combined, these markets represent 75% of the total capacity installed during the next 5 years, and a similar share of technicians that will be involved in its build-out and in its maintenance. I want to briefly discuss 2 key markets, an established market, Germany, and an emerging one, South Africa. So the first reason why we see very strong growth in terms of annual installations is actually rather simple for Germany. We are starting from a very low level. 2021 was another year where new onshore installs declined following the introduction of tenders in 2017 and the associated permitting challenges. There have been a lot of policy improvements in the last 2 years. The new government has established a lot of more ambitious targets and pledged to resolve some of the permitting bottlenecks. And the third reason is essentially offshore. We come from 2 years of market gap where there was no offshore installations in Germany due to the transition from one incentive scheme and the other. But now, with the transition, the capacity is expected to pick up again. If we look at South Africa, which is the most important market in the African continent, the demand for technicians and new installations will grow very quickly. It's also starting from a low level. The fact that there was no large-scale renewable auction during 2020 has created a gap year during 2021, and especially during 2022. Then the auctions that were held in last year and this year, 3 auctions, have somehow boosted the outlook going forward. So as a result, we expect South Africa, the demand for technicians in South Africa, and therefore also for training, to more than triple during the next 5 years. So at the moment, we estimate that around one third of technicians globally will have at least one valid GWO module within the basic safety training standard. The remaining 2/3 may have some training that is relevant for the job, but we don't know at the present moment, and it's certainly more difficult for them to demonstrate their skills across companies and across countries if their employers don't embrace a standard training that can be recognized broadly within the industry. If things continue to develop as they have until now, within less than 5 years, we can actually flip the situation. We can have 2/3 of the total workforce certified in training standards for the wind industry. This is a huge challenge, and we need to find ways to work together with the wind industry bodies and with governments to enable this achievement. More specifically, our recommendation to our stakeholders are basically two. The first is for policymakers at any level, from local to the national. If you're planning regulatory frameworks, for instance, on local content, and plan it in a way that it allows enough people to work safely and to develop the right skills locally. This way you can start construction and installation on time and develop local hubs for operation and maintenance. For training providers and educators, build capacity now and make sure that the people have the best safety and technical competencies that they can develop. There will be a lot of new technicians that are looking to enter the wind industry. And they will all need some guidance on what training to take to qualify as a wind technician, regardless of whether they are coming straight out of college or they are transitioning from a nearby industry, from a similar industry like oil and gas, coal, or the military. So for this reason, we have created a framework for entry-level technicians to make sure that there are enough people with the basic skills that make them ready for employment in the wind industry. And this can happen within 3 job roles primarily: pre-assembly, installation, and operation and maintenance. We will be working with our members and training providers to supply this portfolio of training in all major markets. And we hope and we believe that this study can work as a evidence-based foundation to achieve this goal. Thank you very much for listening, and I welcome any questions you may have.
So now we're just going to do a bit of moderator Q&A, and I'd like for that purpose to bring to the stage Ms. Joyce Lee from the Head of Policy and Projects at the Global Wind Energy Council. Please make Joyce welcome.
Good, Joyce.
Great. Thanks so much, Stuart. Thanks, Andrea, for the great presentation. Really excited to be with you all today for this working lunch. Hope you're all settled in, having had some sandwiches and water. On this topic, which is very close to our hearts. It's about really the heart of the industry. It's about the people, the workforce that construct, install, operate, and maintain wind projects. What we'd like to do now is probe this report a little bit, ask a few more questions about the real risks and hazards faced by the workforce every day at wind projects, and talk about the big picture as well, which countries are most in need of additional training capacity, and where that capacity should come from, where should the investment flows come from. As we're speaking, if you do have any questions, please do raise your hand. We have folks out on the floor who can run a mic over to you, and I'll keep scanning the audience as well to see if there are any questions. So please keep that in mind as an option. Let's start with a kind of bigger picture question for you, Jakob, which is about the risks and hazards in these 2 segments, construction, installation, plus O&M, in the wind value chain, and particularly how is that picture changing as the wind industry evolves and moves into farther waters, into deeper waters, and particularly fixed and floating offshore wind?
Well, it sounds like a simple question, that one, but actually it's a bigger story to unfold. So you saw the slide with the 25 different risks that we have identified in the beginning of creating standards. And really the biggest risk, the most severe risk that you see from working in wind is, not surprisingly, what we call heights. Falling from 100 meters is not a great thing. And then control of some hazardous energies, electricity, any kind of stored hazardous energy, electricity, mechanical energy, hydraulical energy. Those things, oils under pressure, will cause very severe incidents if it happens. So that's something you really need to be mindful of. But the kinds of incidents that we see most of are basic normal incidents. It's things that you would, it's manual handling. It's things when you lift, you get a dislocation of a disc, or when you do a wrong lift or you do a wrong movement. That is a big problem if you work offshore and your body has some kind of an incident with manual handling. You have to get him down through a ladder to a boat to a hospital somewhere. So learning to use your body right is one of the things that we really spend a lot of time on, because while the incident itself is not something that's life-threatening, it really is a big thing, and it can be life-threatening when you are working in that environment. Other thing, working with your hands, cuts, incisions, are things that are keep coming up in the statistics that our colleagues from G+ collect. So also learning how to use your hand and how to work safely with that. Dropped objects, so anything you drop from height can be a life-threatening or life-altering incident. So there's a lot of focus on working with dropped objects as well. So those are some of the things that we're looking at, and this goes for onshore and offshore. In many ways, working offshore comparatively is safer than working very far in an onshore site that's very far from a hospital. Because if you are offshore, you usually have a bigger crew around you. You also usually have a vessel around you. There's a doctor somewhere on one of the vessels, a medical or a paramedic. But whereas if you are somewhere way out in Scotland, in the heights, you may have more than 2 hours to get to your nearest medical facility. So I guess that's a little bit about the picture for that that group.
That's really interesting. So quite a few physical areas of risk. Also the nature of some projects being in remote areas can present a risk as well, and just underscores how important it is to maintain the strong health and safety track record that our industry has. I think there's a related question here about, as the industry evolves, where are we seeing the greatest areas of need in terms of workforce capacity? So I'm going to direct that question to you, Andrea, given the trend that we're seeing in the report about offshore training taking up an increasing share of training needs as we get closer to 2025. And just before I invite you to answer that, I'd like to also point out that we have a QR code on the screen here. So if you are interested in downloading the report and reading through the findings, going through the exec summary and the country-by-country findings in particular yourselves, please do scan the QR code, and you'll be able to access the report that way. So Andrea, over to you on which countries are really driving the most training capacity needs.
Generally speaking, every emerging market should have the opportunity and the need to mobilize local workforces, especially when it's about offshore. It's a sector that has taken the world by storm. So especially where governments are planning policies and regulatory frameworks with local content requirements, it will be relevant to mobilize local workforces in each and every of these markets. On a more GWO specific level, it depends heavily on the footprint of our members. Every year we set a strategy with our members, and last year we decided to focus primarily on 5 markets based on their interests: Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Brazil, and India. And of course, we also have a permanent focus on the largest markets, such as the US and China.
Great. And these markets we're also covering during our sessions at the Global Markets Theater as well throughout this week. So I think there's an overlap there in the emerging markets for wind. Sure, Jakob.
So maybe just an additional point to building on to what I said before. Maybe one of the biggest risks that we see going forward is actually that big number of new people coming in. Right? We have wind technicians that we know we usually cannot keep for a long time. There is a fairly low retention rate on wind technicians. They tend to move on into other jobs. You know, they get kids. They want to stay home, have a different kind of work balance. So we need at least 150,000 new. But it's probably a lot more new people that we have to bring in. And bringing in so many new people and fighting for the good ones in the industry is something that in itself poses a safety risk for the health and well-being of our workforce. So that's why it's so imperative for us to make sure that there is enough training out there, and that the people we bring in actually have the baseline of competence.
Sure.
And if not, we'll have a tsunami of incidents. And that, if we get too many incidents in our industry, and if we're not able to continuously bring down the incident rates, which we have been able to, but if we're not able to do that, the outside world will start looking at us and looking at the industry in a different light.
Yeah.
So there is something about maintaining our license to operate here that's at play. So that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, that's a good point on the reputational risks of the industry as we go into new markets, and we need to maintain this sense of scaling up sustainably, maintaining strong quality of workforce.
Reputational risk is, of course, one thing. I mean, I'm mostly concerned about the people, to be honest. I mean, I would rather that we keep people, more and more people, more and more safe, and that everyone can return home and not just in one piece, but really in a better state than when they went to work.
But perhaps, I mean, if I can come in, Joyce, if you don't mind. I mean, maybe a question to you, Jakob and Andrea. I mean, this kind of churn in the workforce, is that just a function of the ages that people come into the industry and then wanting to move on to a different type of lifestyle? Is there something that we can do to have better retention of people and maintain those skills and capacity within the workforce? I mean, is it something we can do, or is this something you just see as an ongoing feature of the workforce?
I think especially construction and installation pieces is about moving to some place and you have a work that's located in a place and you are probably away from your family, and so the lifestyle that's associated with that type of job caters to someone who does not have a family that they want to be home with, or are able to live in that kind of a work-life balance. And we see more and more people, and at least that's what I hear from our membership, is that more and more people want to have a lifestyle that has a work-life balance where you are with your families and so forth. The operation and maintenance jobs tend to have a more localized content, so it could be good for that. And many of the technicians then will churn into, and they will start working in manufacturing in wind, and then once they're teenagers, become teenagers and leave the nest, then they come back into the technician's role. So there is something about the ages of, it's not because we have an aging workforce, it's because how it fits with your work-life balance at a different level of life.
Let's turn to the question about responsibility here, because there have been a few calls to action as part of this session. Ben, you began your opening remarks with a call to action to industry to make sure that as we scale, we're evolving with diversity, inclusion in mind. We're ensuring especially that gender diversity and gender parity stays at the heart of how the workforce grows. And Andrea, at the end of your presentation, there was some recommendations for the public sector and how to act to scale up training. And so just as a general question to everyone on this panel, in terms of building the capacity, including financing, but also the human resource, the recruitment campaigns, the encouragement to shift from one industry to the wind industry, where is the responsibility split between us as the private sector and the public sector? What role should governments be playing in this transition when it comes to workforce planning?
I think I want to tie together these last questions that you both asked. I don't think that it's necessarily important to reduce the churn rate or the transition and mobility. It's actually a matter of embracing it. And the framework is exactly this. You embrace this kind of mobility need, and then you make the entry easier so that there are less hurdles on the way in the wind industry. Regarding the last end of the question, I would rather have Jakob take it.
Yeah, well, it's not. I think that depends a lot on the country. I mean, each country has their own model of how a labor market works. In a country like my own, I'm from Denmark, there would be a tendency where we have, by the way, state-funded education for long stretches. A lot of this could be could be seen as a public sector job. But in other places, that would not be the case. And I think that's where governments need to create some frameworks that ensures that it happens, whether it happens in the private space or in a government or publicly funded space. I really don't care as long as it happens.
I think, from my point of view, we'd like to see a more activist and proactive stance from governments. I mean, as Jakob said, it's going to be different in everywhere. It's going to be different, but one area in particular, we'd like to see more government funding for people taking courses and getting the education necessary to enter into the sector. I mean, in many countries, government funding is quite hard to access, or it's not focused, or there's kind of many overlapping schemes, or people don't know about the funding. We'd like government to make training much more kind of transparent and easy to access, and also to particularly emphasize and prioritize the energy transition as a theme, right? Because what we see in our long-term projections towards net zero is that we're talking about upscaling of the workforce globally, and it's not going to happen on its own. It's really going to take the same climate emergency approach that we're calling for in policy making. The same climate emergency approach is going to be applied in terms of creating the workforce for the energy transition. Now, having said that, and, sorry, Jakob, I think the industry can do a lot more as well. And GWEC and GWO have many ideas and plans as to how we scale up the visibility, grow the kind of ecosystem around training around the world, and grow the partnerships. GWEC has a plan for next year to launch the GWEC Academy, and I'm giving you this as a kind of first announcement and heads up. You're the first group of people to hear this. We would like to establish a portal, a massive online portal which really creates a series of pathways into the wind industry and makes it much clearer how do you get into the wind industry, because I think for many people around the world it's not clear. There's many young people who'd like to get into the wind industry. It's not clear in many places how you do that. So I think a big project for GWEC next year is going to be around creating that kind of visibility and clearer pathways into many different areas of the wind industry, not just around being a technician, but also all the other jobs in the wind industry. And we're talking to Jakob and GWO about how we cooperate on that as well. So there's definitely more that the industry can do, I think, and the industry needs to grow its presence and its public presence and reach into communities and into education to make that much clearer.
So maybe one thing that we say to the few governments that we talk to, because we are really not a policy-making organization, we try to stay away from that a lot and let our friends from GWEC do all of that work. But though in the regulator role, it's important for the regulator to pose an objective responsibility on the duty holders to keep their people safe, but also resist the temptation to become too detailed. And we have good standards at GWO, and some of them are, for instance, there's one called sea survival that we usually apply when we work offshore. But for a regulator to go to a level and say we should have, when you work offshore, GWO sea survival, is maybe even taking a step too far. But because very soon we'll start working on walk-to-work solutions offshore, where you do not need to train how to get from a vessel to a TP, and then it's another type of training that we need, and it's always developed and it's always evolving, and all of our training standards are evolving based on the incidents that we see, based on the technology, how the technology develops. It's a different thing working on a 2 megawatt and working on a 12 megawatt, and there are slight differences. And so, if anything, regulators resist the temptation to become too detailed. Leave it to industry to develop the training standards as the technology develops. We have a quite rapid turn. We, for instance, are working on height training standards now at version 16 in only 11 years. And that's how fast it goes. And a regulator cannot spend time on updating its detailed requirements every half year or every year, and it becomes obsolete.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So targeted intervention from the public sector,
exactly,
and leaving some areas for industry experts to take care of the details. I think that brings us to the end of this working launch session, which was the launch of our joint report between GWO and the Global Wind Energy Council on this workforce outlook to 2026. So we've heard huge numbers today. More than 500,000 workers are going to need to be nurtured, trained, and ready to construct, operate, and maintain the global wind fleet by 2026. At that point, GWEC is also forecasting 1,400 gigawatts of cumulative installed onshore and offshore wind capacity around the world. And we need high-quality training, high-quality standards, and both public and private sector participation and engagement to make it happen. We've also had a soft launch of GWEC's Academy, a very soft launch today. So thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who are able to stick around, in about 10 minutes, we're going to be discussing the launch of another new initiative that was actually announced at New York Climate Week last week, which is called the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. So we're starting that session at 2 p.m. Please stick around. In the meantime, please join me in thanking our panelists in the usual way. Thank you so much to Ben from GWEC and to Jakob and Andrea from GWO.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
I skipped them.